What's up, guys? Neil here. Welcome back to the channel. Recently, I was watching an interview with Vinod Khosla, and they were talking about what's going to happen when all of this automation takes over. What's going to happen when jobs start to become displaced more and more rapidly? And I know there's a lot of conversation here about AI is not actually going to take jobs. It's going to create so many more jobs than it takes. And I think this is true for the current paradigm of AI that we're in, where we just kind of have these sophisticated chatbots. But there's a reasonable argument to make that in a very near future, these chatbots are going to become more cohesive agents that have the ability to do forms of introspection and actually be able to analyze things to the levels that humans can. OpenAI just actually had a live stream where they were talking about the time frames for having, at first, like an AI research assistant, like a real intern that they could have at the company that would be like an actual intern employee by next year, 2026. And then they said 2028, fully autonomous AI research is their goal. Really, whenever you get down to it, if you play out economics to the logical conclusion, there is no need for humans. Humans actually become inefficient. You don't want humans in your company. You want to get rid of all the humans because they are a bottleneck at this point. And this is something that is bound to happen eventually. So Vinod Khosla, in this interview, he mentioned Donald Trump taking equity in Intel, and the Trump administration actually doing this, which I thought was a very bad sign. And he said, actually, I think it would have been great if Trump did this to all of the big AI companies. And then that can be how we redistribute all of the wealth that is created here. And it only took me about 5 seconds to say, this might actually be the worst idea I've ever heard. And I'm going to jump into why I think that and a better solution to that in the next, I don't know how many minutes here. Let's get into it. Okay, so just jumping right in. This is currently what the structure of the economy kind of looks like. Obviously, there are more companies up here, but Nvidia, Nvidia is like the third richest country on earth right now. Obviously, it's not a country, which is why it's funny, but they're literally the third richest country on earth. The only countries richer than Nvidia are China and the United States. Nvidia is a richer country than every other country by far. And it's a company, which is the funny part. This is going to be a trend that continues to happen. Currently, I mean, there's very, very, very small parts of the economy automated. As AI becomes better and better, and it starts to close the loop on end-to-end tasks, which I think it will in a not too distant future, it becomes inefficient to have humans in the company. If you have a human in your company and you're competing against other companies that don't have humans, you get destroyed. Free markets, capitalism, whenever you play capitalism out to the logical conclusion, capital becomes sentient. And that's what we're doing right now. We're building artificial intelligence to displace the human capital, the human labor, with cheaper synthetic humans. That's effectively what we're doing. And anybody who says, well, AI is going to create more jobs than it destroys, I think that is true in the short term as we are going through like this transition phase. But once as we start to close the loop with these systems, I'm not going to be hiring any humans. I know that for sure. I've had humans underneath me in the past. I've had about 10 humans underneath me in the past. I don't have humans anymore. I don't want any humans under me. I just have software and AI, and that's all I think I'll ever need anymore. So that being said, if we continue to play out the trajectory here, these companies are going to get to the point where they have 50, 60, 70, 80, 90% of the economy within just a group of companies. Now, somebody like Vinod Khosla comes in and he says, okay, I know the solution here. Let's have the government tax these companies, and then we have the government redistribute that to humanity. That sounds, on the surface, like a reasonable solution, right? On the surface, it sounds like, okay, obviously disruption is happening. There's going to be people who just like are useless eaters basically at this point because AI is going to be automating everything. and we're going to need UBI. We're going to need some type of redistribution so that people can have agency. And I think we do need people to have agency, right? But the mechanism at which you give them that is everything. Because this model, in my opinion, reduces agency. It doesn't grant agency. We want a system that grants agency. So the current system that Vinod Khosla is proposing is, again, you tax these companies. It all goes through one centralized group of people, a small group of monkeys that gets to use all of the world's resources. They decide what happens with all of the world's resources. They can redistribute it to humanity. If you look at the previously how the government's been working the past 30 years, they kind of like pull the pork, they fill their own pockets, and then they bloat they bloat a bunch of markets. We're trillions of dollars in debts. There's all of these problems happening. And all of the places that do have lots of government intervention, do have lots of regulation, have these things. All of these places are the markets that are currently fucking people. Excuse my French. But if you look at the healthcare system, if you look at housing, all of these places are where government gets their hands in and they try to regulate things. And all it does is it causes technology to not be able to deflate prices so people can afford it. So if we actually take this model, it ruins people's agency because now you have this person saying, I have strings over your life. I decide where this goes. You have effectively a small group of monkeys owning the rest of the monkeys. That's effectively what you do with this model. You have a small group of monkeys that get to dictate the rest of the monkeys. You don't have to look very far back in history to see what happens when this occurs. If you look at Mao, if you look not far back at all, it's not a very good thing. This is very dangerous. Now, it doesn't matter who is up here in the government. It could be Trump, it can be Sleepy Joe, it could be Kamala, it doesn't matter. Anybody who's up there, any monkey, any human at all, is going to fuck it up. Why? Because we are these evolved creatures that have psychological biases that we think we have agency over, but they have agency over us. We are literally an information propagating system that has been designed to propagate our genes. That is all we're designed for. The best way to propagate your genes is to amass as much power as possible and not give it up. Which is why whenever you have a system like this, it always fucks everybody, right? So here's what I propose. Here's a much better system. I think the structure, the way it looks right here, you don't really have to change this too much. All I'm going to do is I'm going to slide these right here. I'm going to slide these right here. I'm going to bring this up right here. So this is going to be very confusing looking. I just like move some things and it doesn't really mean much. But let me explain. So I think a much better system, instead of having like the government dictating everything top down, a small group of monkeys telling all of the other monkeys what to do, what would be much better is if we have OpenAI, NVIDIA, Tesla, Google, all of the frontier model companies, the companies that will be automating large parts of society. If we have a mechanism for these people to do a form of redistribution within themselves. If you look at Balaji's The Network State, something similar, where these companies give people autonomy within their organization in order to build society around the network state that they're building. And then the role that government plays is to mediate, not dictate, mediate the relationship between the employees or humanity, whatever you want to call them, the organizations of humans with the companies, right? It mediates the relationship between the companies and humans. And now the interesting part about this is you have these companies competing with each other for governance structures. It's not that you have one government dictating how everything has to be. You have Tesla, Google, OpenAI, NVIDIA, Meta, any of these companies that are going to be automating large parts of society. They all have their own way of doing things. Elon has his way of doing things. Sam Altman has his way of doing things. Demis Hassabis has his way of doing things. They all have their different belief systems. And effectively now that they have these super powerful AI models, they have these super powerful tools for humanity. Pretty much any human on Earth can be an entrepreneur in a very near future, and it won't be that hard. Um, and they'll also have things like WorldCoin with like the iris scanning technology that WorldCoin has. It doesn't actually invade your privacy the way it's designed with cryptography. So something like WorldCoin in a form of redistribution within this one organization, and then you have all of these organizations competing with each other on governance structures, you can start to have a more dynamic system that's fault tolerant. Instead of having one system, one person at the top dictating everything down, you have more of a system that's from the middle, where you have a bunch of different organizations that have their own way of doing things. And now, again, governance is the new product. The basically the governance structures that these companies will have is the degrees of freedom for humans. That's how they could have KPIs for their product, right? The new product of OpenAI is the degrees of freedom for their users. How much wealth can they build? What can they do? How can they create with each other? What are the degrees of freedom that I can provide with the infrastructure that I have as a company? Same thing with Tesla. Same thing with Google. These now all become their own network states, and they can use the degrees of freedom for human agency as the KPIs for the product of their company. And now the government just mediates the relationship of these companies with each other, so you can't have a monopoly, and it also mediates the relationship between humanity and the companies. And now these companies are competing with each other to give people the best opportunities possible. And the people can migrate between any of these companies at any time. You can be a member of all of the companies at once if you want to, if you really wanted to be. But you can migrate between any of the companies. Let's say NVIDIA's product isn't doing too hot. My degrees of freedom as a human, my agency, my ability to provide value and feel a part of NVIDIA has gone down. I need to go find a better place that I can be a part of that thing. I would need to be contributing to something bigger than myself, so I have purpose. I need to have the ability to do these things, have economic agency, have as many degrees of freedom as possible as a human within this big system. I don't like NVIDIA anymore. Let's go to Google. Google is going to provide me with what I want. Let's go there and figure out how I can fit into this puzzle, provide value, be somebody who is finding a way to contribute to the greater thing, to the organism of this company or this organization, this hive mind, if you will. And I think this is where it would be best for us to go. Instead of having one group of monkeys dictating top down, you actually have incentive alignment. You have incentive alignment for the degrees of freedom of humanity to be expanded, because now these companies are all competing with each other to give humans more agency than they once had. And if the government is dictating this top down, it's actually constraining human agency. The one thing people don't really realize is there's not really much difference between the government and a corporation. They're both massive, they're both bureaucratic. It's just a big group of monkeys. That's all it is. It's just a big group of monkeys where capital flows. It's fucking all it is. The products are different. That's it. The government has a product of telling people what to do. The company has a product of whatever the fucking product is, right? That's as simple as it fucking is. And people will say, mental masturbation, all these different mental gymnastics. No. Group of monkeys versus group of monkeys. Why is this group of monkeys better? Because you thought it was, and that's it. So the best way to do this is to mediate the relationships between groups of monkeys, allow them to compete and align incentives for a outcome greater than humans ourselves, an outcome that is agency for humanity, right? Otherwise, you're going to have the one person, the government at the top, aligning incentives for how can I fatten my pockets, stay in power, and everybody else is oppressed so I can continue to propagate my genetics, because that's what humans are designed for. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the video here. Hopefully this made sense. I think kind of what we're going to in a very near future is, first it'll start off with these companies where governance is the new product, And then over time, more and more people will be able to play in this realm where you'll have hundreds or thousands of companies that are now network states and they have governance as the new product. And yeah, it's going to be pretty cool. And companies and corporations and organizations will be less so top down. It'll be more so bottom up. It'll be uh, like a wholesome system, like a circle, where there's no top down authority. The authority is distributed. And then since we have so much agency with artificial intelligence and powerful technologies, these corporations that are very decentralized will be way more powerful than the bureaucratic top down corporations. This form of operating would have never worked without AI, but now that AI is coming, it's going to force it upon us. Otherwise, the market dynamics, the game theory, the competitiveness, it'll win in the end anyways. So just some food for thought. That's how I'm building. This is what I'm keeping in mind as we move through here. Yeah, that being said, I'm going to wrap up the video here. I have a community linked in the description below if you'd like to talk more with me. If you want to hop on our group calls, you can ask questions in the community and then we'll talk about them on the group calls. We can hash everything out that you are thinking about, or if you're building any companies, you can have direct help from me. That being said, I'm going to end the video here. I will see you in the